Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley are two of the most recognizable names in rock and roll. They are the only two members of Kiss that have continuously remained with the band since it started in the early 70s. Bruce Kulick was the lead guitarist in Kiss for 12 years, from 1984 to 1996. Over the years, I've done a few interviews with Bruce. During these interviews, Bruce spoke to me about the type of relationship Gene and Paul have with each other, their different personality types, how Gene and Paul approach writing music, and more. In this video, I'm going to show you some of these clips. Most of these interviews with Bruce were done for my documentary, What is Classic Rock? If you want to see the full documentary, it's linked below. What is similar and different about Gene and Paul?
They're both really driven and know how to be successful, but they do approach it a little differently. Gene's a really big vision guy, and I think Paul likes to feel like he may think of things more from the heart and how it emotionally affects him. So they're creative a little differently. And everyone knows Gene's a real business guy, you know. Even though the band is much more follows Paul's his heart and his passion for what the band should be, you know. But Gene's the business guy. Now Paul really knows business. In no way am I trying to say that he's not the one making sure that deal is right and negotiating with Doc. You know, Paul handles the business as well. But Gene will license everything, like Hello Kitty toilet paper. Okay. So they approach it a little differently, but they are so similar in many ways in their work ethic and their ability to complete things, have a vision to do something, you know. And that's why, you know, like both of them are so successful outside of Kiss. Paul says, like, I like painting. Maybe people would love it. And he's been so successful with his painting, you know. Gene will be like, I want to be involved with these business things and write these business books and start a restaurant chain, which eventually Paul was involved in, which was very smart. But you know what I mean? And he makes it happen. Not everything sticks, if you know what I mean. But they're both very, very driven, very professional in that way, and hardworking business people.
Well, working obviously with Kiss, Gene and Paul being the creators of the band, we all know the era, of course, that Ace and Peter were involved with them. But once those guys left, you know, it was really always Gene and Paul's, you know, ship to steer, you know. And they certainly were very confident, and they knew what they wanted and which way they were headed, although, you know, the music industry is a free-for-all, really. So you do always have to think about what you want and where you're headed and how to get there. But every time there was some sort of creative thing, I needed to earn my kind of like respect from them. They knew I was a talented guitarist, but in the sense of like now writing songs or getting involved in their compositions for the albums, or any other opinions that I might have towards, you know, making the band the best it can be. It took time for me to, you know, prove myself, you know. Most awkward point would be, let's say Paul had a point and Gene feels somewhat differantly, and then, what do you think, Bruce? And I'm like, you know, that wasn't comfortable for me, okay. Because you want to be true to yourself, and eventually I found that the only way, if I'm in any position like that, I have to follow my instinct and be honest with what I think it is, okay. But I learned how to present songs to each one of them, which was a little bit of a challenge. But
so band politics, in a way, plays into the creative process too. Is that fair to say?
It's in everything in life, politics. You know. You know, a band is a family, and you know, there's always what I like to call the pecking order of who's really in charge. And sometimes, you know, sometimes in a relationship, an observer may think that the guy's the dominant one, and it's really the woman is. You know what I mean? So it's always hard for people to understand who might really be more controlling the situation and that person's desires happening. Certainly in many ways with Kiss, even though Gene is very much out there as like a big, you know, everyone knows he's not shy about sharing his opinion about business, and everybody knows he's a intensely, you know, intelligent marketing person and everything, and always talks about that. But you'd be surprised that Paul is super sharp, and in general, Paul's going to get the final say, not Gene. But a lot of people don't see that, from the outside. So that's why the dynamics of every group are a little different when you're on the inside, understanding things more than what you may see. Now, certainly, we know that Keith Richards and Mick Jagger have their good and bad days. Everybody knows when he wrote that book, that Mick didn't like it too much because he probably said some things in there that wasn't so flattering to him. But generally, most big bands, there's two people. You can go back from Led Zeppelin to the Stones and Kiss and the Beatles for sure. We all love George Harrison and Ringo. It wouldn't have, you don't feel like it would be the same without Ringo. But when you think of, well, who were the ones steering the band? It was John and Paul, of course, in the Beatles. So every band has those dynamics.
Did you have a relationship with Gene and Paul prior to being hired? And how did your relationship build with them over the course of time?
Well, I kind of only met Paul a few times when my brother asked me to come into the city, because my brother knew them from auditioning and then doing ghost guitar work with them, right? So, but I can't say I knew him. You know what I mean? I was like, I had a car, so I drove. You know what I mean? And then we went to a movie or we went to some club. But if you're going to ask me, like, did Paul really know you? Not really. And I was like, he was kind of shy, actually. I knew he knew about Blackjack, which was great, the band with Michael Bolton. I think you can see some of that over there on that wall. But, I didn't really know them, okay? And there was one time I got to go by the studio when they were mixing I Love It Loud for Creatures, and I'd met Eric Carr for a second, but, again, did I get any quality time with any of them prior to going on the road and rehearsing with them in '84? Not really, no. So, but though I always had a lot of respect for them, you really get to know somebody when you're going to travel with somebody and work with them, Writing in Kiss actually was a wonderful challenge for me. Wonderful in the sense that I even had the opportunity. Now let's dissect the word challenge, because they compete with each other, Gene and Paul, and I have to use my instinct and my talent to come up with music I like. And then who am I going to pitch it to? Because it almost kind of got to that point where I realized if Paul didn't like it, I can't just give the used idea to Gene and finish it, and vice versa too. Which really meant I had to, hedge my bet in the best way that it's going to wind up, you really like it, okay? Gene throws a lot of things against the wall. He's pretty open and likes more things. And Paul, you really got to really grab his attention with something. Fortunately, there were enough riffs that he liked, and maybe that's going to be a part of a verse, or maybe it's a couple chords in the bridge section, and it would spark him to write something, And by the way, we only would work on things that he felt like, I really like this enough, we're going to finish it. There was very little, leftover stuff. With Gene, there were others, Gene has probably 5 albums worth of material that didn't make it to a Kiss record, and I was a part of some of that, not a lot of it, but I'm just saying that he would continue writing no matter what. And Paul was very driven to just finish what he really feels like, this is going to go on the record. I know it. You know what I mean? And that was a good feeling to go along for the ride. So both of them very different, how they would write, and both of them very different in the sense of what turned them on to want to be in the creative process. Every band has those dynamics.
And I could just add that, for example, Grand Funk, the version that I'm working in, which is so Mel and Don are able to use that name, Grand Funk Railroad. But do I feel like I'm competing with the original, what everybody knows from the 70s? No, it's a different version of the band. And since we do some new songs, but we're not putting out an album every year or two like most of the other bands that I've worked with. So it's not the same in the sense of my years in Kiss, for example, or any other band that I may have had a very instrumental part in writing or things like that. And our job, what Grand Funk is now, is to get out there and play live and celebrate what I feel is great classic rock music. And I know that the crowds that we play for, which are all different generations, really have an amazing time. So that's the win there, that I get to play my guitar for those people. But we're not doing like where Kiss each album and we needed to like, you know, progress and you change a little bit and you know, maybe we're, you know, doing music that's a little, you know, different, reflecting how we feel at the time. It's a completely different thing.